Hello and welcome back. We're on to our third video of the month. We have another deck tech with a wildly outdated commander, but we're still going to give it a go. It is June of 2025. It's Pride Month, and I thought I would spend this month trying to catch up and do a video log of all my currently active decks. Now, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I am not a content creator. I don't really care if you like or subscribe. I'm mainly doing this for myself because I find it interesting to see the progressive history of this format change over the years and seeing some of these massively outdated commanders that I've played for well over a decade, the cards that have changed in those decks. That's just an interesting thing for me to do. If you want to enjoy the ride, sit back and enjoy. If you love playing these classically old, wildly outdated commanders, what I like is just hearing how you're making it work. If you have the technology, the tech for something that hasn't seen play for a decade, teach me. Now, also, if you're familiar with my channel, you know I'm a Grixis player and a Rakdos fan. So we have in my collection a color combination of everything within. This is the current mono blue deck. My old videos, I used to always default to Rain or Alexi for mono blue. I love Keiga, and we've played her before, especially when the legendary rule was changed for how these things hit the graveyard. That was quite a while ago. But in my old deck tech videos from like a decade ago, we usually ran one of these two. Unfortunately, with the current power creep and what we're seeing in the format, these two are just not playable anymore. I've really tried looking into creating deck lists for both of them using modern cards, but there's just not enough to make them work, past being a essentially vanilla body or a cantripping body. But Keiga's interesting. Now, Champions of Kamigawa, when we first saw this set was 2004, I believe, which makes Keiga at the time of recording this video 21 years old. This piece of paper is 21 years old. We're still running it as a commander. So what she does, we have a 6-mana dragon spirit flying 5/5. Moderately impressive, not really. What happens here is when she dies, we get to take control of a creature that someone else has. And as a permanent effect until the game ends. We even get the card after the game. No. It's a mind control without mind control attached. Now, again, if you're familiar with my channel, you know I almost always have access to one clone deck. It used to be Grixis with Gwendolyn de Courcy or Dimir, Izzet. I've always had a clone deck of some kind. I believe the last time I did clones was with Rain. That was 2014 probably. But the trick here, with how this rule works, if you clone Keiga and the legendary rule triggers, you have to sacrifice one of the Keigas. So if you send one of them to the graveyard, probably the clone, you get that death trigger and you can take control. So every clone in your deck that works with the legendary rule will be an act of treason or a mind control effect. And that's kind of the fun that we're doing here. Not exactly the best strategy in today's era because this is a 6-mana commander that requires a follow-up card. So really, what this deck is tribal solemn simulacrums. The goal of this deck is to try to sustain until late game. So most of the early game effects is tutoring up and cloning a solemn simulacrum to get the islands to then support the late game Shenanigans. So this deck tech video is going to be a lot quicker than my other ones because most of the deck is clones and I don't have to actually explain that tech. So let's set Keiga over here and talk about the junk of the deck. This whole chunk are clones. Now they're not all creatures, some of these are spells. I have the rest of the cards broken down by card type that we will get to. There is also a potential combo in the deck by a few lines, and we'll talk about that as we get to it. It's not intentional, but it is kind of necessary to have access to an incidental combo in some games, because the power level of this deck is questionable. This might fall into the category of battlecruiser, but to make it actually functional against a bracket 2 deck, I have put in 3 game changers. They are not 100% necessary, but being very realistic, this strategy is not ideal. Not everyone is going to play the degenerate things that a clone deck wants to clone. Like, yes, if someone runs a comma and you have clones, you're going to have a very fun game. But if somebody's just playing a precon or one of those new low CMC commanders that uses a lot of synergistic small cards to create a ridiculous board presence. It's very hard for a clone deck to imitate that, which is why we usually default to cloning Solemn Simulacrums. Let's go through the clones. Again, this whole stack, no reason to dawdle here. There's a few that require some attention because they may only clone our things or they may only clone the opponent's things. And I'll point them out when we get there. It's just something for you to keep in mind when you or if you build the strategy. Phantasmal Image. This is a wonderful new artwork. Classically one of the better clones. 2 mana. If you look at it too funny, it disappears. We have another 2 mana clone in Flesh Duplicate. It slowly disappears over time. We have a Mirror Mimic. This comes in as a copy of anything, but it has a Disturb ability, so it can come back from the graveyard. I will throw up an image on the screen here, showcasing what the Disturbed side does. Then we have the Copy Crook. This is a generic 4 mana clone that has some extra bits on there. Most clones are just 4 mana, with some extra text added on. And this one, I think he just connives. Yep. Yeah, he connives. I don't actually know what the extra bits on half these are because all I usually use them for are their Enter the Battlefield trigger. You just get some ETB value off of a clone. We have Sakashima Student is a ninjutsu clone. We have an Undercover Operative, a 4 mana clone with a shield counter. We have a Stunt Double, which is a Flash clone. There's a few Flash clones in the deck. They are tucked further back because usually the Flash clones can only hit your opponent's stuff. We have a Vizier of Many Faces, a clone that can come back from the graveyard. The Embalmed Creature is a white permanent, but there is no color identity on this card talking about white, so this can be a blue, mono blue card. Does not break that. We have Sakashima. Sakashima is one of the original powerhouse clones that was a fantastic commander. I love artwork by RK Post. I am surrounded by his artwork. Actually, I have a few prints. I'll see if I can showcase some of that in this video. And this particular card, this foil, is something I've been carrying around for ages. Like 15 plus years I've had this piece of paper, and it's just so it's hard to see in foil, actually. But this is, yeah, we'll stick it over here for now. But, love Sakashima. Still very expensive, but ironically, probably overpriced for what she does. The return to hand ability is not 100% instant. It has to wait till the end of turn. So she's overpriced most likely from nostalgia and also this beautiful RK Post artwork. Going on, we have a Cycling Flash clone. This one is enjoyable because it can come in as an artifact. Copying an artifact randomly can be good. But we also have this beautiful, beautiful gold border going around. It does not look like piss yellow at all, I promise. We have a brand new clone. This just came out. This one has an effect from the graveyard where we can transform everything into a temporary copy of something else. We have another one of the original better clones. There's a lot of OG clones that could be in here, like Actual Factual Clone or the Zuvian Doppelganger or Shapeshifter. A lot of clones have been slowly power corrupt out by just better clones. But being able to randomly clone an artifact or even the cost reduction of the Metamorph has made this significant. It's just always going to be a playable clone. Gigantoplasm is potentially a very large clone. If someone mind controls you, of course they can pay 0 to instantly kill it. Clever Impersonator got this fancy new Secret Layer artwork, which I don't know what that's from. Like, I generally don't know what this is from, but it's really cool artwork. I like this. It can be anything. It could be an Omniscience. We have one of the first Flash clones that can only hit something your opponents control. You have to keep that in mind. So if your entire goal is just Keiga and Solemn cloning, you cannot use this one. There's a second one that is another Flash clone. Can only be one that the opponents control. There's other fun things. I think there's another one that got weeded out was the clone that was a wall defender, and it tapped down the opponent's creature, and it didn't untap until the clone left play. It used to be a very good answer to commanders. I'm racking my brain for the name of that now. I'll show an image on the screen. But that one is another one that's slowly been crept out by just better options. Flash is always fantastic. We have ones that can only clone our stuff, which is why this one costs 3 mana instead of 4. Another fancy artwork from whatever that set is. I don't actually know. We have one that could be a land. This deck runs 36 lands. My normal land count in decks are 37. But because this is in the deck, we are down to 36 lands. Basically, it could be a land on the other side. But it can only clone our stuff. Now, this one's a bit awkward. We have to talk about the other Sakashima for a second. There are things in the deck that can disable the legendary rule, which means it would turn off the primary tech of our commander. That can be good and bad depending on the situation. So, frequently, the opponent might cast a very good card that is a legendary that we want to clone more than once. The most recent example was someone played the Lyra Dawnbreaker, whatever the angel, the mono white angel that gives things lifelink was. That's strictly better than Keiga. Like, no matter what. And what happened in that game was they attacked me. I took it because I knew I had this in my hand. So I took theirs, I cast this, and made, I think, 6 or 7 Lyra Dawnbringers. That was a fantastic game. But that's the problem, is like, by using this or having this in play, it will disable legendary rules. So you have to be careful and mindful and plan out your strategy when using this Sakashima. We have another one that can skip a legendary rule, kind of sometimes. Comes with a counter. We have spells. Now let's get these creatures out of the way. We're going on to the clone spells. Tempt with Reflections is one of my favorite cards to sandbag until you have a Solemn Simulacrum. Because, yes, you could clone something random, whatever utilities in board. You can cause chaos on the stack by seeing how many Keigas. Everyone's going to say no at that point. But if you use this on a Solemn Simulacrum, everybody wants a Solemn Simulacrum for free. So you jump ahead very efficiently and quickly with this one card. Rite of Replication is one of the other old classic clone cards. 4 mana for a token copy is nice, but you usually get a lot more. One of my favorite tricks in this is always to right-kick something like this, where you get multiple death triggers since they will all legend out at the same time. Another fun trick was with Vela the Nightclad, which, again, I love Vela, but that deck has passed its time. We have some more. This is a brand new card. It can make a token copy of anything, which is fantastic. Like, well, it's got to be a creature, but copying a spell on this deck is the unique part of this card. We have another 2 mana clone. This is one that has withstood the age of time. Like, 2 mana for a clone is fantastic. It does require an upkeep cost. This one's a little confusing just because the Oracle text is very old from the Dark. In short, it's a 2 mana enchantment. It comes into play. You create a token copy clone of something. And then you have an upkeep cost, or the clone goes away. If the token goes away, the enchantment goes away, vice versa, same thing. You're really just using 2 blue mana to get an enter the battlefield trigger, and then you don't care if it dies. That's it. That's the whole point of this card. But 2 mana is good. This one is equally hard to read because of the artwork. See if I can catch that on camera here. The TLDR is this side is 3 mana to get a token copy clone. This other side is a nice way of doubling triggered abilities if you have something that you want to trigger, but realistically 7 mana is pretty damn high. We're using this side to get a token copy. And more brand new clones is Imposter Mech. It's another 2 mana clone that becomes a vehicle. We're again just using this to get an enter the battlefield trigger. If you're just cloning Solemn Simulacrums over and over and over, 2 mana, very efficient. Sculpting Steel, same thing. This could be a Solemn, this could be a Cage Sun, this could be any artifact you see in play you need. As bad as a Soul Ring or some kind of artifact land, could be as good as a Blightsteel Colossus. Who knows? And the final clone of the deck is another comes into play trigger. It will become a mana rock with that creature's text box. This is a unique one because most people get confused knowing that you have a creature text box on a mana rock, and you end up having to reiterate and explain it a few times during every game. Every game I've played it, I've had to actually explain it like 3 or 4 times. Because someone tries to keep creature kill spell like Doomblade or whatever, but they just can't do that. The last time I played this, I believe it was a Sheoldred of the Apocalypse. Mana rock, a 4 mana, taps for blue, Sheoldred of the Apocalypse. And everybody kept trying to damnation and damn it or just kill it, but it's a little hard to do that to a mana rock. That is it for the clones. Let's go through the rest of the deck. We'll do it by card type. And now that you know the goal of the deck is to try to get a Solemn Simulacrum to play and clone the Solemn until eventually dirtling with Keiga. I'll show the primary cards. When I get to the combo pieces, I will push them aside and we'll talk about the combo potential later. So, creatures. Transit Mage is a brand new card. This tutors up for a 4 or 5 mana costing artifact. There's a few in the deck that are important. So yeah, this could get Solemn Simulacrum. More importantly, there's 2 mana artifacts in the deck that tap for mana that this can also tutor for, part of the combo. We'll get there when we get there, but this is a tutor usually for Solemn, could be used to get something later. There is the most glorious Solemn I have. I love this little sparkle. It's really hard to catch in this camera here. But this is the foily guy that's got the extra sparkles in the background. I just love the blue effect on this. It seemed to fit the whole aesthetic of the deck the best. And I really do enjoy this artwork. I'm not a very big fan of all these secret layers. Like, some of them are just hideous, to be honest. But this particular one just seems beautiful. And like that depth. The dark background, the blues, it just fits perfectly for this deck. Archaeomancer is a problem. This is the key combo piece of the deck. And again, I'll explain all that after I'm done with the cards in the deck. This is a very old card. 4 mana, 1/2, comes into play, pick up a spell from your graveyard. That seems insignificant, doesn't it? But there's some interactions that you can do with this when you're using clones and flicker spells that allow for infinite potential. And I'll explain those lines as we go. But look at this beautiful card. Again, this is another one of these random promo cards that just looks so gorgeous. Like that art style. Who wouldn't want to play this card? I'm going to stick her over here, and we'll talk about her in a second. Since this deck has the potential to do a couple infinite loops, I don't have haste to enable an instant win, but that does mean I could use Venser to infinitely bounce everything, which is usually a concession point. If you bounce everyone's lands, this is not something you want to clone, but if you have access to infinite blinking, that's game ending. This is also, I believe, the only 1 or 2 of permission spells in the deck. I don't think there's a hard counter in the deck anymore. I can't remember. But he is one of the only permission spells that can interact with the stack in this deck. Moving on down, we have Thassa, Deep Dwelling. This is a potential better commander. If your goal is to do more degenerate things, and you don't really want to just dirl around with a Keiga, and your goal is to clone Flicker, Thassa is realistically the better option as a commander, but she is here just to be our Conjurer's Closet of the deck. Something to get a Flicker effect and rebuild a clone, reassign a clone to a different creature, for example. Going on down, we have a Deadeye Navigator, as you would expect in a deck that wants to flicker and reset clones. A nice flicker effect, a repeatable one. Deadeye hasn't really aged very well. He is still a terrifying creature to see. But 6 mana and the pair trigger, essentially 7 mana to get any value, is a very steep cost. Most people still don't know how Soul Bond works, because a lot of people think as soon as the pairing happens that it's GG's and they can't interact. Letting you know, you have an opportunity to respond to a Soul Bond trigger. This is an ETB trigger. Soul Bond goes onto the stack, and you, the opponent, are given an opportunity to then respond to the Soul Bond trigger before you are allowed to flicker, or the controller is allowed to flicker. So don't let anyone try to skate by and say that as soon as this sticks, they're winning. You will always be given an opportunity to respond to Soul Bond, including every time the flicker happens, because whenever something flickers comes into play, it has to re-Soul Bond. But yeah, there's potentials with him. We'll stick him over here. Cataract Leviathan, one of my favorite things to clone. This is the best way to make new friends, is you put him into play and you bounce everything to all your opponent's control, and then you just clone it. And then the clone will come back, this will come back to your hand, but then the next turn you can play this and bounce the clone, and then every single turn you just, yeah, that's how you make friends. Is that how you make friends? I can't tell. One of my favorite things to do in a black splash deck is using Animate Dead on, or like a Necromancy, the enchantment reanimation effects on a Cataract Leviathan, because that essentially means for 1 or 2 or 3 mana, you get to bounce everything every single turn. If your goal of your deck is just to flicker Solemn Simulacrums until you have an obscene board advantage, and you're just resetting everybody else's board every single turn, you're going to win that game. People have to find a way of answering that, and that's really where spot removal is necessary. The weird part is Unearth. Unearth lets you buy this once from the graveyard, and then if it leaves play, it's exiled forever. But in this style of deck, we're playing cards that have the ability to return things from exile. So if you unearth the Leviathan, and then you flicker it, flickering is meeting the requirement for this to be exiled. But flickers, like this in Deadeye, give it an opportunity to return from exile. It is then a new permanent. It is no longer known to be unearthed. This is a very problematic card. This is a very outdated card, too. Shards of Alara was pre the 2011 pre-cons. That's like 2008, I believe. Very old tech, like really outdated tech, but still very difficult for the opponents to deal with if you can start chaining this off. Going on down, we have 2 Fact or Fiction variants as our creatures that can enter the battlefield and get us some card advantage. I love Fact or Fiction in EDH. It gives you, the player, an opportunity to interact with your opponents. And it usually allows for shenanigans and a dialogue. Creating a dialogue in EDH is a wonderful way to take heat and pressure and de-escalate maybe angry players. So Fact or Fiction is a type of card, which we'll get to, which is a card selection. People make piles. Sometimes it's you, sometimes it's them. Then a pile is chosen, sometimes by you, sometimes by them. It goes to your hand, the other to the graveyard. So these are bodies that come into play and do that. Fantastic things to clone. But let's go to the spells. Now, I already showed the Essence Flux with this beautiful Seb McKinnon artwork. I love Seb McKinnon artwork. But we also have the problematic card of the deck that goes with the combos, which is a Ghostly Flicker. So this is a one-shot exile flicker effect. This is used to get another into the battlefield trigger by rebuilding or re-signing a clone or getting something like that. Ghostly Flicker can do it for 2 targets, like 2 different clones. You can do a clone in your land, a clone in your mana rock. That's important. Now, this is a card that I would not recommend cutting if you want to get rid of the combo potential. Keep this in the deck. This is very good for any kind of clone deck. Get rid of the Archaeomancer if you don't want the combo. But again, we'll talk about that, and I'll say the lines later. High Tide, it's a mono blue deck. What'd you think was going to be in here? If you're not running High Tide in a deck that has 20 plus islands, this is a fantastic ritual. This is basically like the mana geyser of mono blue. And this is combo. There are potential combo routes with High Tide. And we're not doing like untap effects with... Well, I just lied, didn't I? We're not doing untap effects. Immediately shows a turnabout. There are so many lines when it comes to these cards that it's almost impossible to actually say all of them. For now, I'm going to set them over to the side and we will talk about them later. Turnabout has been what I've been replacing Cyclonic Rift. I've chosen to not play Cyclonic Rift in any of my decks. I have 1 copy of the card left, but I've replaced it with Turnabout. Turnabout can be used offensively to tap down an opponent's creatures, but is usually used to untap your lands to generate mana. It's like another mana geyser. It's a ritual. But these 2, we're going to sit over here so we can talk about them later. Going on down, we have this beautiful new artwork for Fact or Fiction. I have no idea what's going on in this artwork, if he's just confused, but it looks cool. Fact or Fiction is a classic card, just one of the original default staples of EDH for card advantage, instant speed, end of turn, Fact or Fiction for the win, EOTFOF, FTW, if you know what I mean. But in this deck, it's a nice way to just get some extra cards in hand. We have Fabricate. This is here just to get Solemn Simulacrum. There are other artifacts we can use this to get, but primarily this exists in the deck just to get Solemn. We have Acquire, because we really want a Solemn Simulacrum. This could go get one of those out of the opponent's decks. You can always politely ask if an opponent has one in their deck, but no opponent really has to tell you that. This can be used to get any artifact, but we are primarily using this to get Solemn so we can generate our board presence. Bribery is here for the exact same reason. Yes, you can go get an Avacyn, you can go get a Eldrazi or a Blightsteel, whatever crazy thing the opponent's playing. or you can get a Solemn Simulacrum for 5 mana. Word of Invention is here just to get Solemn. X for 4, end of turn, pop Solemn into play, and you're ready to go. Aminatu's Augury is a great, fantastic card for card advantage. The fact that you can even get an extra land off of this is what really pushes it. We have an almost equal assortment of artifacts and enchantments and lands and creatures, instant sorceries, that this has hit all modes a few times for me. We have one of the game changers in the deck is a Mystical Tutor. It is right next to the reason why it's in the deck is a Devastation Tide. So, and if you have an army of Solemn Simulacrums, you know that you can politically play games if you want to try to Devastation Tide at instant speed on an opponent's turn. You can ask someone to just kill one of your Solemns if you have this in your hand, because then you can put this on top of your deck and miracle it off of the Solemn dying. A Mystical Tutor is just kind of a generically good card in this deck. It's not necessary, but because I put a few other game changers in this deck, I chose that one as another inclusion. But this does not need to be in the deck. Devastation Tide really should be in the deck. The mass bounce is kind of our best way of interacting with the board. You can do either mass bounce with things like this, or Crush of Tentacles, or you can do something where you're blowing up the board if you want to not rebuy your creature. Something like a Perilous Vault or an Oblivion Stone or something like that. I just like the old miracles. We have an Evacuation to go with that, a nice instant speed one. I unfortunately sold that 7th edition foil one I held on to for God knows how long. Mitotic Manipulation. This is funny. This is essentially a rampant growth in the deck. So you look at the top 7 and you match a card type, or if a named match card is in those 7, you can put it into play. It usually hits an island. It could hit a Soul Ring if someone else has a Soul Ring in play. There is a Rhystic Study in this deck. I have hit Rhystic Study off of Mitotic Manipulation, which was funny. I know I lost that game. I should have gotten the island because I was mana screwed. We have also one Reverberate effect, a Fork effect, the original one that goes with the Saviors and Champions set. I wanted the original one to keep with my flavor. Running a Singleton Fork effect, if you have access to those in your colors, is always good. Narset's Reversal might be the best option accessible to us in these colors. I only own one copy of that spell, and that's in a different deck. But I like Twincast, the original that we have in blue, and it just felt more flavorful for this particular one. But let's go on to a few more enchantments. This one does not create a clone for us. It is a Panharmonicon. But more importantly, on this side, for 2 mana, we can double an ETB trigger. So if you have a Solemn entering the battlefield, you can pay 2 mana to get another trigger. Then this sits off in exile until you're ready to have a 5 mana Panharmonicon. This is actually really good. I like this card a lot. We have another game changer in Rhystic Study. It's not necessary for the deck. It causes more gripes and anger, really. But this deck is quite underpowered, even compared to a precon. Some of these new precons that are coming out, think about like that 4 mana black, blue, green dragon that just came out that recurs things from the graveyard. It has access to some of the best ramp spells available, so you can see that dragon on turn 3. It comes with a Dalthy Voidwalker and like a Living Death in the precon. So the power of the precons are being so pushed that this deck without the game changers would never be able to compete with a precon of that caliber. So with these game changers, even though this is not necessary, it's giving it its best chance. I'm not a fan of Rhystic Study, but we still have it in here. Most of my decks, I have like a selection of all Grixis colored decks. I put an assortment of 1 or 2 or 3 game changers in each one, so I have access to all these degenerate cards. I have one EDH deck. And that EDH deck, I'm going to have a funny video posted here, which is, can you find the fake card? Half of the deck is fake, and we're going to play a little game in the next video in a couple days here, where you, the viewer, hopefully will be able to spot the fake cards. Because some of the ongoing issues with the market and MTG and Hasbro and the flooding of the market with all these new cards, it's obvious a money grab. It's obviously them trying to cover up the counterfeit market. I don't want to get too far off on tangent yet. We'll get there when we get there. So if you see a Rona Demir EDH deck and you want to play a little game of spotting the fake cards, we'll have some fun in that video. But the TLDR is I have access to the majority of those cards in the decks I'm actually enjoying playing, because I don't play CH very much anymore. In all my decks, I always run one Planeswalker that is on theme, unless it's a Planeswalker deck. This one is specifically the best for Keiga because it can go get Solemn immediately and put Solemn into play. If it survives, it can be used to untap mana rocks, but he is here as a 5 mana, -4, go get Solemn Simulacrum, put him into play. Let's go on to the artifacts. We have a few that have sustained the test of time. Wayfarer's Bauble has always been fantastic in any non-green deck. This is the closest we can get to a Rampant Growth. One of the best turn 1 to turn 2 plays other than Soul Ring. Soul Ring is always going to be there. Some of these really shouldn't be here, but they are remnants of my old decks that I held on to. As I said in the beginning of the video, I sold out of EDH. About 95% of my collection I sold around 2020. I had a binder full of basic lands and a few cards from my childhood that had memorable nostalgia associated with them. The of Ramos cycle with his wildly outdated mana rocks, but I had a selection of them all. The black and red ones are in my Keiga deck currently. But I had the blue one, so I might as well have stuck it in here. This really should be any other mana rock. This could be a Coalition Relic, a Worn Power Stone, a Mind Stone, like Arcane Signet. Like, this could be anything. But we're running this because I had this for... oh, gosh. Yeah, I've had this since it was in Standard. I'm sorry, it was in Type 2. Mirror and Safe House is a new card. I really like this card in non-green decks. Usually somebody somewhere plays a fetch land. So just like thinking of Wayfarer's Bauble as a 3 mana Rampant Growth, 1 and 2, if someone has played a fetch land at any point in the game, this is a 3 mana Rampant Growth, because you can play 3 and then crack it for a tapped basic. Sometimes Cabal Coffers gets blown up, sometimes there's a Nykthos in the graveyard, and then you have access to that ability as well. But this is almost usually 3 mana, crack it immediately as a fetch land. There's a Myriad Landscape in this deck too. So if we use a Myriad Landscape earlier in the game, we would have Myriad Landscape's ability on this as well. We have a Thematic Compass. This is another fun way of getting an extra land into play because it will turn itself into a land later in the game. Fantastic card. This is another one of those fun artifacts that if you already have your game plan going on, you've already got your Solemn army built up and enough islands, you could just get this instead. You could Whir of Invention this into play, or you can clone this, because this is not an artifact that's legendary. So if you start doing something like you Clever Impersonator or Sculpting Steel this, you're going to have a wonderful game. Now, these last two are mana rocks that tap for more than 3 mana. And that's important. This one taps for 4 and this one taps for 5, which means if you had access to Ghostly Flicker, and you flickered this artifact, somehow that Ghostly Flicker came back to your hand, for example, these would come into play, and then you could use that to tap for Ghostly Flicker mana again. We'll explain those lines here shortly. Let's go on to the lands we have. First, we'll get the basics. We have the same exact islands. If you remember my last Alexi and or Rain deck, these are all the Onslaught Islands. Just beautiful. These are probably my favorite Elliott Islands ever printed. There are 28 of them, and as I said, I have one of those little MDFC dudes, and then we have 8 other non-basics, starting with the flavorful ones for a clone deck. Mirror Pool, we have a few colorless sources. This could become a copy of a spell or a thing later in the game. I don't know of the last time I actually activated this. I'm trying to remember. I almost never activate this because I don't want to go down the land. But we have Vesuve and the Thespian Stage. We don't have Dark Depths in the deck to abuse these, otherwise you'd see things like Expedition Map to go get them. But these are just fantastic cards to have access to, because eventually someone might have the Dowsing Dagger land that taps for 3, or we can make extra copies of the land that takes creatures out of combat. But these are just thematically here, not really intended to be broken. We have a mirrored landscape, as we said, fantastic to go with that mirrored safe house. So this is a nice little 2-for-1 effect. We have an Ancient Tomb, which is our final game changer of the deck. Again, this is not necessary for this deck. I'm only running this because of the bracket system utilizing game changers. If you put 1 game changer in your deck, you might as well go up to 3 game changers. There's no reason not to at that point. I don't really like the bracket system. I think it's generically flawed because of how it treats green and ramp spells versus every other color. But Ancient Tomb could be a Cyclonic Rift if you were so inclined to have more access to the blue kind of cards. This deck, we have a 6-mana commander. We like to see Solemn earlier than later, so this is one of the ways we can do a little bit of ramp a little bit earlier. We have Academy Ruins to help pick up Solemn Simulacrum. That's literally the only reason this is in the deck. Another clone that could have been in the deck was the one that cloned something in a graveyard. I'm racking my brain for the name of it. But it is a clone that comes into play as a copy of something in the graveyard. But this is our option instead. We can use this to just pick up a Solemn. We have a little bit of graveyard hate, and one more way of getting a Solemn clone. Realistically, I've used this actually to clone or make a copy of Archaeomancer more than not, because that's one of our fail-safe backup plans, is to try the combo route, because we really don't want to go down land, and this is the only desert we have.
Have more power than you might be giving yourself credit for. If you have something that's going on in your life right now that's challenging, painful, it's just a reminder to take a little bit better care of yourself. You're worth it. You can have this feeling anytime you choose.
Is my Keiga deck. And I love these super old commanders. This is not a good deck. This is just a really fun deck, and I do wish there were ways to make my other OG mono blue legendaries work still in this format, but I believe their time has passed, unfortunately. I don't think there's enough cards to make them work, and there's no direct synergy pieces that could make them work. But I will continue uploading more deck tech videos. I have some interesting ones coming up. I think next I'm going to work on... Oh, I was going to show the deck box. So this is a Naughty Dragon. So obviously for the Naughty Dragon, you should have a deck that has a Naughty Dragon logo. But yeah, we'll do some next ones. I think the next one I'm going to do is my Izzet deck, because I want to do a little bit of a chat about EDH Rec and the problems that come with utilizing EDH Rec and how YouTube content creators are using that to generate deck tech videos. that are not good deck tech videos. Well, that would be a different topic altogether. It'll be a completely unique type of video I'll make. But stay tuned. I hope you all have a wonderful Pride Month and take care.